You're up.
Jeff,
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's funny, New Year's seems so far away or so long ago.
I know. It's week one.
Ugh.
Like, week one was a little hectic, but that's become like the nature of the beast these days, huh?
I feel like every year for me personally, and I can only speak for me, I feel like every year in the past 4 years, the first week of the New Year's is like a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like external forces and big surprises and surprises you don't want. And all kinds of things happen in the first week. So I feel like we survived the first week. I feel like the rest is going to be gravy from here.
I mean, let's hope so. Let's hope so. I mean, it's good to have that optimistic vibe to things. I hope things continue to get better, but we'll see. It's gonna be a marathon as always. How are you doing? Are you staying healthy? Is you're in Atlanta? For
I'm in
anyone
Atlanta.
watching, Kira moved from LA to Atlanta in August.
I
Um,
did.
but we've been keeping our podcast all fall, doing episodes, and now we're in the new year, and we really can get rolling with it. We have new graphics. We're really excited about that. If you're watching visually, you can see them. Um, but what's Atlanta's good. How is everybody? What's the environment like there? It's always fun to compare Atlanta to LA. It's a different place. How are things there?
Yeah, I think COVID wise, everyone's just kind of doing what they're supposed to be doing. They wear a mask when they go into the store, they take it off when they come out. You don't have to walk around with a mask on. That's not a thing.
Yeah.
Social distancing isn't really a thing either. And then it's gotten, over the past 2 days, it's eerily quiet here. And I live north of Atlanta, just like 25 minutes away, in an area. I don't know if you heard about the woman. I'm sure everyone's heard about the woman that passed away during the riots. I think she was trampled to death. She's from Kennesaw, and that's where I live. I live in Kennesaw. So it's a small little town.
Is it like Cobb County, Georgia?
It's Cobb County, Georgia.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Cobb County, Georgia is always on the news during elections because if Cobb County goes blue, then the whole state generally goes blue. So, and that's what happened this past election. Um, but it's been eerily quiet. All the Trump signs are down. I think everyone's staying in their homes and doing some serious self-reflection going on and moral compass finding, especially where I live. So, yeah, you're surviving? No COVID, no nothing there yet. Not for you specifically, I'm assuming.
How are people walking around there with no masks? Like I can't even. It's so different in LA. You can't go in anywhere without a mask on here. I mean, you literally
Yeah.
cannot. It's just not allowed. People aren't wearing masks inside? Like,
Sometimes.
oh,
Yeah, no, it's kind of like where, like, is COVID still a thing? Question mark down here.
yeah.
Like we know it's a thing. The urgent cares are packed full of people getting tests, but other than that, it's not. No one's real concerned.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like LA where I think it's like what 1 in 3 people have COVID. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, it's been really strict here. Just the restrictions. I mean, we still don't have outdoor dining, which I do believe that outdoor dining possibly contributed to making things worse because instead of being responsible and staying home, as they should quarantining, I think people were going to each other's homes, and that made it
right,
even worse. In the outdoor dining, while it is a public place, and that's dangerous in and of itself because there's other people around, um, being outdoors is better than going into someone's home with. So when you close that, you take because the public won't behave themselves anymore. They're just not going to do it. Fortunately, people get to go to each other's houses, and I think that's been a big contributor to the rise because outdoor dining is open almost everywhere except LA at this point. And I think New York's even open outdoor events. I think everywhere is except um, LA. So, I think that I really think they need to open that up. I think that's bad leadership at this point. Um, and but it's been really rough. It's been brutal. The hospital's been brutal. I think that it's different place here. And then that brings us into just everything going on with this week. There were the said Georgia won, or the blue went blue with the elections. Happy about that there. And then kind of right after that went down, we had the Capitol riots, and I think 4 people. These people raided the Capitol and broke in tragically. 4 people died, or 5 people? How many people is it? 4 or 5 people, right?
I think it's 4,
4.
right? Yeah.
And there was one woman that was shot by police. I don't know. She was climbing through a window or something. I was reading about that. But what do you think? Kind of our first topic. What do you think about all of this? What are your thoughts on everything that went down?
I sat when it was going on, I was watching the news anyways because I was wanting to see who was winning the Senate. So I had the news on anyways, and all of a sudden the news broke. So it almost felt like a 9/11 type of situation going on. And it's hard to sit there and watch something like that happen. I think we've seen it in movies. So it's very eye-opening to see that transpire. I'm sitting there glued on my couch for like 12. I couldn't get up. I mean, I wanted to get up and eat and drink water, but I couldn't because it overwhelmed me.
Yeah.
And we were supposed to do our show Thursday, and I had to text you and be like, I can't. Like I am so upset and so angry and so disappointed and embarrassed, and the energy that it took for just to like try and wrap my head around all of this. I needed the 2 days to just kind of sit there with my thoughts and try and make sense of it.
How are you doing now? I know it's rough for obviously all so many people. Really, really rough. How are you doing now? Are you?
Yeah, I'm better. I finally ate some food, drank some water, taking care of the body. I got some sleep. I think I slept 12 hours last night. I hadn't been sleeping the past 2 nights, and I'm sure like most of everyone out there, when you don't get sleep, your brain doesn't function as well. So definitely feeling better. Definitely am able to wrap my head around it a little bit easier and not allow my emotions to get so overwhelming. But definitely when I was sitting there watching it happen, I was texting my family, who I know are extremely pro-Trump. And I asked them in a very point blank way, not accusatory, just, do you denounce extremism? Do you denounce Trump right now? And so because I just couldn't fathom that they would still support a man that incited, this type of violence. So, but between what I was watching on TV and my own personal family of like trying to figure out if these are people that I want in my life based on if they support extremism, it was a lot. So yes, I'm feeling better today.
He was inciting it, and I mean, just the tweets just went way too far, with that, and he was inciting it, and I think that, and I see people tweeting and posting and such that trying to saying that people that broke in and such were actually, Antifa people and they weren't Trump supporters and such, and like, I mean, to get to that conclusion, you would have to assume that Antifa showed up looking like Trump supporters and said, "We're going to break into the Capitol," and all of the Trump supporters just stayed outside at the hot dog stand. You know,
Right.
like you guys go in, and we're all going to stay outside. That's not
Right.
a rational point of view. To
Right.
think that a group of Antifa came and said, "We're breaking in. You guys stay outside," and everybody like said, "Okay, that's the bad guy." Like it's so like not in on the rational spectrum there. And
Right.
I have a lot of people that are on the right. I talk to them Twitter stuff, and that that doesn't mean that some rogue Antifa I don't even know anything about Antifa, but some Antifa people weren't there because there might have been there, but there were 2,000 people there. So okay, so maybe there were 20 Antifa people there randomly. Maybe. I mean, you get these big group things, there can be all sorts of different people there. But to say that the 20 Antifa people that were there were the ones that went to Capitol and everybody else stayed outside. Well, what about the people outside that were going after police and those? I mean, you saw stuff on the front steps. So you're just not being rational. You just have to own up to it that those were Trump supporters that broke in, and that's what happened. I mean, there's no getting around that. Okay, so and I think they do agree there. It's unacceptable to break into the Capitol, and people keep comparing it to riots over the summer, and the riots and the looting over the summer is also inexcusable, to burn down businesses and so on and so forth. But there's a it's you and I have talked about this. There's a semantics thing, you know, because there were protests that happened all summer. We're not burning down buildings, and like there were peaceful protests for like George Floyd and such. Like that was happening, but that gets conflated in with all the riots. And that's not to say some peaceful protests didn't turn into riots, but the right wing people overlook these peaceful protests that were happening everywhere. And I send them links of the peaceful protests. So there's a lot of conflation happening with that. So you can't compare breaking into the Capitol to George Floyd protests. Like that's not the same thing. So I try to like balance and let people know that like there's a lot of apples and oranges being compared, and people really don't always get that straight. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of whataboutisms going on. Well, what about when Black Lives Matter and nobody cares about those riots? And when I see remarks like that, I always respond with, when I saw or see violence, I condone it. Or I don't condone it. So it's violence is violence is violence. I don't agree with the protesters that turned into rioters who started burning down buildings during Black Lives Matter. And I don't agree with the people that stormed the Capitol. I think it's not all Democrats and not all left-wing people believe that Black Lives Matter protesters had the right to burn houses down. I mean, just like not all right-wing people are Trump supporters and are extremists.
Right.
But our brain, in order to make sense of planet Earth and the things around us, our brain likes to categorize, right? We have to bucket people into things, or things just don't make sense. And we've talked about this before on the show, where, people want to find out what Jeff believes in. Are you a right wing or left wing? And because you don't fit into their buckets, they can't figure it out, and it blows their head. They can't make sense of it. This is the same thing where you can be on the right wing, believe in Trump's policies, and completely be absolutely horrified and by these people that decide to storm the Capitol.
That's right.
just like the left, where not all left wing people are burning houses down and rioting and protesting. So I think it comes down to the fact of semantics. It comes down to us feeling the need to bucket one side into another, and not realizing that we're actually a lot more complex as human beings, and our thoughts are a lot more complex, and our beliefs are a lot more complex than that.
You see how the formula though? There's like a formula, and it's like same on each side with these things. Like there's a
Yeah.
That's literally like what's happening with people aren't. It's semantics, and people aren't separating that. For example, if I look at the other side of it, when these burnings were happening, that doesn't mean like because businesses are burning down. That doesn't mean that there weren't some people that were doing that support Black Lives Matter.
Right.
But that just because that was happening doesn't mean that Black Lives Matter is a looting and rioting organization. Like
Right.
It doesn't mean that. Like even though you have somebody who supports them burning down a building, people can't pick that apart. They can't, And if you go to the website and read more about what they're about, you can understand it deeper. But people conflate because somebody, does commits a crime or burns down and they support, the LA Rams, that doesn't mean that the LA Rams are a crime organization because one of their supporters did that. Does that make sense? Right. I think people are missing that on both sides. That's completely.
Well, what it is,
missed.
Jeff, what it is it's called critical thinking.
Yeah. That's what it comes down to.
And I don't mean to. I wouldn't call people dumb or stupid. It's like reading comprehension 101. You know what I mean? I remember in school growing up, we always had to take reading comprehension, tests, and you would be scored, based on your comprehension of what you read, and it goes along with the same critical thinking. So when you read something online or you see something on the news, are you taking it at full face value, or are you allowing yourself to stop and think for yourself? What I'm seeing, and this is from the advent of social media, is that I'm seeing a regurgitation of just words. Like you'll hear Trump say something, and then you'll see the exact same verbiage spewed out of people's mouths, like fascism and socialism and all this stuff that they also then in the same tone can't tell you what the First Amendment is and how that relates to social media or doesn't relate to social media. So everyone's just kind of taking what they see and then regurgitating it back out without actually the process happening of critical thinking. And that is what happens when you stop and the critical thinking, and you assume that Trump is telling you to go burn the Capitol building down, and you go do it. Now, is that what he wanted to have happen? I personally don't think so. I think he's of a higher intelligence, higher critical thinking than people actually believe. And he doesn't actually realize that people may take his word as like the Bible, word for word. And there are people that take the Bible word for word, like yes, there was an Adam and Eve and the whole, there's people that take it word for word.
That's right, Carrie.
That piece of people are the ones that stormed the Capitol.
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. And not only does it happen, it happens in all realms about anything. Yeah. I mean, people take whatever news they watch and they take everything that's said there as word for word, or they take it literally, or they take it out of context. There's so much bad thinking going on with things everywhere that it what makes me wonder, if we're getting to a point of awareness where something has to change, everybody's awareness to to get us through that, so these things don't happen. Like, when are we ever going to get to that point? I wonder when it's coming, because um it's rough. And people, I tweeted yesterday, and I've posted this on Facebook over the years, and it's not what you think, it's what you think about what you think.
Right.
That makes sense. So if you think something, when I think something, I then step back and I look at what I'm thinking. I step
Right.
out of and then I reason and rationalize on that level. So, like, when something happens anywhere, it's good to take it back and say, okay, I'm thinking this. This other person has this point of view. Like, what are they seeing that I'm not?
Right.
It's really hard for people to do that. And I would encourage people to try to understand what the other people are thinking. I do it constantly. I don't know why. I wasn't into any of this stuff, like politics and everything, until about 2 years ago, when everybody came obsessed with it. But going the long lines of what you're saying, people really struggle to do that, and I would encourage everybody everywhere to try to think about what they're thinking, because we're all flawed. We're all flawed in thinking, and the more you can kind of monitor your reactions to things, I feel like it's a healthy thing.
And I agree 100% with what you said. The other piece that I was thinking about actually yesterday, which I am like so incredibly grateful for, and I believe everyone should have this in their life if they
Hmm?
can find that person, is the checks and balances person.
Yeah.
And that person for me is you, and I think we both do that back and forth where Jeff and I don't agree on everything. There's a lot of topics that we don't agree on, but we are able to have, text messages or whatever of like, hey, what do you think about this? And what it is I'm bouncing off of him, or, I want feedback. I want to hear what his opinion is so that it helps me kind of think about my own opinion or see it from a different light.
Yeah.
And I've actually reached out to Jeff about many things as it pertains to lots of different topics that are going on, COVID, whatever it is, for a point of view. Because if I were to stay just in my own little bubble and people that agree with me and I agree with them, and we just are like vomiting out the same language back and forth, you can't critically think. You get sloppy and lazy, and you don't allow your brain the opportunity to think something outside the box. That's what it means to think outside the box. You allow different points of view to come in without your ego freaking out. And I am so grateful to have Jeff in my life, and just in business and personal perspective, that we are able to have that checks and balances, the back and forth, where I feel like I'm like, what is going on, blah, blah, blah. Jeff is like, wait a second, look at it this way, or look at this way, and vice versa. I think
Yeah.
that's really, really important, that people start to look a little bit outside their inner circle and
Yeah.
allow other points of view and other people into their life, and bring in constructive criticism. There's nothing wrong with constructive criticism. The person that gets offended by criticism is a person that has an ego that's talking too loud. So for what it's worth, I think for sure, to your point, to take that, maybe step outside your box, but I think it also takes another person to hold you accountable to that. And you are that for me. So thank you.
Thank you. You're that for me too. We did, it is a checks and balances, and I do the same to you, and Kira and I have now done this for a couple years, and she's right. I mean, we need more people doing that. And if you agree with everybody blindly about everything, that's not necessarily a healthy thing. There needs to be some disagreement for progress and for, as you said, understanding, for stepping outside your box. And I will say, and if going on the notion of that, of everything you just said, which people really need to take to heart and open up to talking and listening to other people. I think that, could be, if people get to this understanding, a one plus of social media, where, and we aren't there yet, but where people can do the checks and balances of each other. If everybody who you agree with is just on Twitter, Twitter's going to be a very, very boring place.
Yeah.
because everybody's just going to say, well, now let's just, post photos of, whatever, and it gets very boring. So even though you disagree with someone and you hate them and there's something about just humanity and people where you need the opposing point of view, for whatever reasons, like psychologically and growing. And I've always said about the left and the right that they kind of keep each other sane.
Right.
Like, if you go too far either way, it's like you fall off the deep end. And I think that's why our Constitution and everything way back when was designed the way it was, and why things became this way, because each side needs the other to keep sane. So neither side is ever going. They're not going away either time soon. So
Right.
they're always going to be there, no matter how much you hate that opinion or how much you, like, there's something about that. And I wonder, and this brings us into the Trump being banned discussion.
Yeah.
Now we're getting into 2021, and I think social media, as we've discussed in past podcasts, is becoming the main thing. Hi, Steve and Marco, and we've got people in here. Michael, I just want to say their names out loud. It's good to see people chat. I think that that social media is going to become the big discussion, and I wonder if eventually, I don't wonder, I think we are going this way. We're going to need a digital setup of some type, of checks and balances. I wrote it on Facebook last night and on Twitter. We're going to need a constitution of sorts, whether that's more laws, more rules, and we've mentioned this in the past, that are set up around the checks and balances of each other. Because if everybody just goes to Parler, and I know, despite how much, conservatives were playing the guilt trip yesterday about, Twitter hates me now, I'm going to be kicked off soon, so on and so forth, and no matter how much liberals are like, go to Parler, get out of here, it's just not realistic that's going to happen. That everybody's going to be in their own realm, because Twitter is boring if it's just one side, and Parler is an echo chamber. It's just never going to happen, because each side wants the other side around, no matter how much they say they don't. They do, because they're going to be bored if they don't. And I think that digitally and connecting to social media, we're eventually going to get to a place where somehow it's going to have to be designed as a checks and balances. And I don't know that anybody can really see the frame of how that's going to work. But, it's going to relate to algorithms. It's going to relate to, being able to understand various opinions. Because let me give you an example. When I post on Facebook, I'll also put, or Twitter, I'll do things for the same reason you said that you and I talk. Is you, just because you post something doesn't mean you always agree with it necessarily. Sometimes you're just wanting feedback, like you and I do. Sometimes it's humor. Like, God forbid people can't take a joke, You know, I
Right.
posted this thing from what's his name this afternoon. You know, E.O. Huggins, who made a joke about Biden's. He said it sounds like a fifth grade textbook, and it was hilarious. And it was like a joke that you'd see on stage. And I'm saying everything. I can't wait for people to be outraged about this, because God forbid I told it after I tell 107 Trump jokes, and if I
Right.
tell one Biden joke, you know, I can't wait for the outraged people to come into the room. And we need to understand that people can be. I mean, Joe would probably laugh at that. You know, we need to get to a place where, and people used to humor. We lost a lot of the humor. Dave Chappelle talks about this actually a lot. Um, we lost that, and so some posts can be humorous. Some posts can be, you know, there is a sensitivity level, I think, with it. So you have to. That's kind of gray. That gets really tough, because some things can be and some not, and it's very gray area there. But I think that is intention. I think with the being insensitive, sometimes people can be insensitive and not realize they're being insensitive. Okay? It happens all the time. If somebody makes a mistake, they post something and they're being insensitive, if someone alerts them, hey, like, you know, that's offensive. Like, the person can't say, oh, I'm sorry, like, I didn't mean to offend you. You know? Like, what do you want me, what should I do? You know what I'm saying? Like, people can't have those discussions, and we need to get more open to that. We need to be open to apology, to realizing that people make mistakes, and we're all flawed. People make mistakes, and people misinterpret what they're saying. And if they apologize and they say, "Hey, I didn't mean to do that. I didn't know. You know, I'm naive." We have to admit our own ignorance about things. You know, I always tell people, like, I know that, like, I'm ignorant about things. Like, I don't. I'll say that outwardly. Um, and but people struggle with that. You say things sometimes and not realize it. You know, and we need to get to a place where communication is much better on those fronts. And I think social media is going to be connected into that. And I think the digital world has hyped that up 100,000 times worse than it was. And I think that's why we're now in this place. And I think we're getting to a place where now we have to look at that. That was a long monologue. That's my take on everything. You know, what do you
Well,
think?
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think it is interesting when you actually speak with kindness and sincerity and appreciation, and people think that you're insinuating something else. They don't actually truly believe that you're just trying. You're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. And I've started to do this just to test it, and people are actually then get angrier because they can't wrap their head around the fact that you're saying, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry, thank you for correcting me. They think you're being shitty or passive aggressive, and it's just like, at some point we need to be able to pull down the ego.
It's
And
ego related, isn't it? Yeah.
it's 100% ego related. Yeah. It's like protection wall. You can't, you know, always defending yourself. Always, always, always. Even when you say in a very respectful way, no, what you're saying is incorrect. Here are the facts. The person either blocks you or they defend themselves and attack and start calling you names. That's when the conversation starts to go down the toilet. Yeah. Like, you have a nice conversation, nice dialogue, then you can see the dialogue shift to this like accusatory. Then it goes into degrading, into then banning, and you know, you can see the progression of all these conversations go, and they start fine and then they go downward, and it's the ego that's doing that. Yeah. I think the more people learn about the ego and what that looks like, and instead of feeding it, to be able to pull it down and say, you know what, my fault. I take responsibility for that. My apologies. The end. You don't lose any clout. You're not going to shrivel up and die if you admit fault to something. You know, I personally, You know this. I mean, I watch lots of different news sources, and I will watch Fox News just to see different perspectives, just to, keep the brain open a little. And I'm actually quite impressed, shockingly impressed with how Fox News has covered what's going on.
Yeah.
Now, granted, yes, you've got Tucker Carlson going off and everyone else, but what I've seen is a lot of like humbling speech going on Fox News. I think they're noticing that they are partially responsible for believing what a person who is power hungry was telling them, and they were spreading the misinformation, and I'm actually impressed to see Fox News pulling down it's the left's fault, and they're like, you know what, we've got some issues, the GOP's a mess, we believed in someone that has completely lost control, and you see now people are opening their eyes, and it takes a lot. It's not easy to be able to pull down the ego. It's very difficult, but you are more respected as a person when you do it. People lose respect of you in a nanosecond the minute you have to defend yourself against, something someone's saying. And it's like, just pull the ego down, say you're wrong. If in fact, the truth is not on your side, the First Amendment stuff and this censorship stuff is fascinating to read. It's scary at the same time. I fear for education system in the US. I think people need to learn a little bit more. I have a lot of patience and a lot of empathy. I struggle when people literally speak about things that are completely false. I mean, I don't even know where they come up with it. It's like, open up a history book or open up a constitution or learn something, you know what I mean? But the spewing of things that are like completely baseless is a little scary, to say the least.
Yeah. I just wanted to, I agree with all that. We're great. But you mentioned the education stuff. I don't know much about that topic. I have seen people say, I know that Scott Adams says this. He talks about the teachers' unions. I don't know a lot about that. I need to read up. I mean, they're really after the teachers' unions. I don't know enough about the teachers' unions, really. I don't think the left necessarily agrees with that. I don't know enough about it. But I do know that there's a lot of problems happening with education and how we're going to structure that and what you're saying there. I don't know if you know anything more about that or what the teachers' unions are doing.
You actually make more as a retired teacher than you do as an employed teacher. That's how powerful the union is. I liken it to the Detroit Auto Manufacturer Union. Huge powerhouse, huge.
Yeah.
And for years and years and years, American auto manufacturers created the worst pieces of junk on the market. And the union got so powerful that it was like just churning crap out, I'm for union, but not for power hungry, fear mongering people in unions. But the teacher union, that is a big problem.
So you agree it does need to be looked at much closer.
Yeah, I mean, we have a horrible educational system, and I love teachers, and I support them, but the US is ranked terribly in the world in education. Why is that? We have all the money, we have all the resources, and we're ranked so poorly year after year after year of education.
Yeah.
And what comes with education is critical thinking.
The critical thinking.
So if you have a lower education level here, the critical thinking doesn't even exist. So then you have issues on a daily basis, such as we've seen in the past 2 days, where people are so blinded by things that they weren't really taught critical skills of how to
Yeah,
to interact with the world.
that's
You
right.
know, and I'm gravely concerned. I think it definitely, look, everything happens because it needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything. Um, what happened 2 days ago? Extremely unfortunate, awful, needed to happen in order for people to wake up. I think you mentioned it earlier in the show. You're like, when is it going to happen that people start to open their eyes? That was 2 days ago. And you're starting to see the ramifications day out in and day out. Trump's being banned, parlors being taken off. You know, you're seeing like, okay, now enough is enough. Now everyone's stepping up. But usually, you know, it's interesting. When I used to live in Los Feliz when I lived in California, and I lived on a really busy street. And because it was parallel with a boulevard that was very busy. So everyone took ways and took my street, and it was packed. It was like a neighborhood street. There's kids running around, people are zooming down it. And cops would pull people over for going too fast, wouldn't work. So we petitioned the city to put humps in, at least to slow people down. I mean, I was always crossing with my dogs, people were walking, pedestrians. And it is next to impossible to get bumps or humps on side streets. And why is that? Because literally someone has to be killed. A kid needs to run across the street and be killed, and then you'll get your bumps that you need.
Because of all
And
these rules and regulations.
that's unfortunately what happens, is that you have to have things that happen like 2 days ago, like the riot, the Capitol extremist riots, treason. You know, I think it's treason. That has to happen in order for things to change. People don't just change for the fun of it. They have to hit the rock bottom and then they change, you know, and that's where we're at as a country. That's where we're at as a society. Everyone's now turning on social media, blaming social media, you know. Now, shockingly, everyone's, oh my God, I didn't realize they had this much power. It's like, whoa.
That's
You know?
that's the yeah, but I think that's, you know, that's what some people, some perspectives say too about you know, there's, I mean, I've seen this many times, you know, where the most aggressive forms, you know, when people are you know, barge, like that stuff is what brings the change in historically, like the rough, even though it's bad and oftentimes it's breaking the law, like that brings, unfortunate, like it's sad, I mean, it's upsetting, you don't want that to happen, but that brings change. I've heard people say, you know, I heard you know, who was it, Hawk Newsom was talking about, he was on Fox News maybe 6 months ago, you know, and he was saying that, you know, historically that burning, I mean, these aren't his exact words, but in so many words he's saying historically burning, like the burning and all that stuff, and like that actually brought on change. That's what that caused things to change. And obviously people came after him, and whenever anybody says that, but you know, historically that is what brings change, you know. So I think that even though we don't like it on either side, it is true that that does happen. And I think that a lot of people believe that, you know, even though it's obviously bad, I think a lot of people do think that's true historically. And yeah, so I know exactly what you're saying there. And you know, so I think it brings us to, you know, and I see somebody here, we could talk about some of the people in the comments here. You know, I see Jacqueline saying, hey, I have an idea. Let's just obey the real Constitution. Freedom of speech is freedom of speech. Weirdo. I don't understand what I like her to elaborate a little more there, because I don't really understand what she's referencing.
Well, I
or
can
what.
see that, you know, there are comments of like, today Facebook and Twitter is the new dictatorship. That's not new though. And I guess that's the problem I'm having, is that I'm on Twitter and Facebook trying to help educate people that the minute you typed in your first word into Google, they owned you. The minute you downloaded Twitter for the first time and did your first tweet, on YouTube right now, we are owned by these companies. And I for people to now all of a sudden start freaking out and saying, oh my God, look at it, they have too much power now. It's like, where have you been the past 20 years?
Yeah.
I mean, literally, where have you been? Because to me and Jeff and a lot of people, I mean, it's like, this isn't new. Of course they can ban you. What did you think when you signed up that you're holier than thou and you can say whatever you want? No, of course not. And, all of these companies have all this information about you, and you signed up for it knowing that because whether you read it or not, you agreed to their user agreements. They're private companies, so they don't have to share with you how their algorithm works, and they can do whatever they want. They don't answer to the government. Yeah, that's a problem. That was a problem 20 years ago. Same problem today. You're just now getting affected by it. Now you're affected by it and you're shouting. It's like, no.
You're going on for
right.
Yeah.
This isn't
new, you and I were talking about it 2 years ago on the podcast. And I want to clarify, I'm not calling Jacqueline a weirdo. She says in the text, I guess she's calling me a weirdo, or you a weirdo. Kira and I are weirdos, so we don't disagree with her for there. No. Or I don't know what Kira thinks. But
no, we're definitely weird.
Yeah, we're weird. So let's just away the cats. Yeah, so I mean, Kira just covered that. I think that there's going to have to be some. I think everybody is like some adapting, changing something to get things to work accurately in the digital world.
Well, here's the thing. The FCC has control over the telephones. There's nothing that controls the internet. The government didn't understand what the internet was and thought it was like just a phase in technology. And do you think the white men and women in government, the old white men and women in their 70s and 80s, have ever picked up a phone to look at YouTube or Facebook? They have no idea. They have no idea what is going on
at all.
They're not in it, and that's why Trump, as much as you can hate on, as much as anyone could hate on, be like, you're the one who did this. He has no idea the power of his words on social media and what social media really is, and yes, to your point, I'm seeing a lot of people talk about freedom of speech and First Amendment, and it's like, okay, censorship in the First Amendment is to protect you from being censored by the government, not private companies. So the Constitution is not on your side. If you get banned by Twitter, you can't claim First Amendment because the government doesn't own Twitter.
That's the thing. That's the problem with this whole Section 230 thing, right?
Correct. And how old is the Constitution? Super old. And yes, do we need an updated one to include the tech world? Yeah, but we needed this years ago.
We needed it 10 years ago.
We needed it when it first came out, just like the telephones. Do you know how freaked people were when the telephones came out? Freaked. And I mean, like, freaking out. Any type of technology, cars are governed by the government.
It took a long time for seatbelts to come around, right?
Right, exactly. Cars. Now, 20 years from now, we'll look back and be like, oh my God, the internet was such a wild west.
Such a mess.
Not fun.
Yeah.
I mean, the antitrust, we talked about this 2 shows ago. The antitrust lawsuits that the government has on Facebook and Google are monumental because they just woke up last year and are like, oh my God, the social media giants are way too big. They need a little bit more of a hand from us, government. We need to start breaking them up. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But to me, I'm like, where were you guys the past 10 years?
And I know, like you were saying, I saw your conversation with Louis. I saw you, or Louis, however you say it, like you were talking about, about how it takes 20 years for us to realize it after the fact. Like you were saying that to him on the on Facebook, and I think that's very, insightful and accurate. So we're at that place now, and we have to kind of all come together in that way and figure that out. And it's going to take some work. It's going to take some work. Marco says today on Facebook and Twitter is the new dictatorship. Now they tell us what we should believe or not. Does that sound familiar? And then GY says, we as a society cannot allow any psycho to have platform to do craziness. I think that's case by case, because I think you have to, what's crazy to some is not to others, and you have to kind of break that down. So I think that's a little complicated. A lot of people think that different people are crazy. Like, there's a lot of people that think, some people will say Joe Biden's crazy, some people say Trump's crazy. So breaking that down is complicated. And then I'm seeing any more comments here.
My biggest thing that I'm seeing is that I think people don't realize their impact that they have personally on the world. It's very easy to point the finger and say Biden, Trump, Putin, whatever. But when was the last time you actually pointed the finger at yourself and looked at yourself and the way you design your own moral compass,
right,
and your own code of conduct?
Right.
And do you actually think about how you affect others with your tone, your speech, your words online? All of that's connected. The society is all it is made up of a bunch of people. And if one person's shittier to the next, it's a domino effect. It all affects everyone. So we are, and I've said this, that we are all at fault for what's going on in society. Yeah. It's very easy to point fingers and blame and all of that, but the way that, everyone's like, what has happened? And it's like, what has happened for you? When was the last time you said something hurtful online that you knew was kind of shitty, but you did it anyways? Because you're like, doesn't matter, but it does. You're the one that's inciting this spark of, anger and animosity toward people. So it's an ownership, it's an accountability that everyone has to take. Everyone has
personal responsibility.
Of course. How do you use social media? Do you say shitty things on it? Do you tell people that, or use derogatory language, or use hateful speech, or call people names? I'm sorry, but you're part of the problem if you do. You are the problem. You are the problem if you're doing that on social media. You're the one, if you're doing that kind of stuff online, using social media that way, there's a reason why Twitter and all these other, social media are cracking down, because they don't want that on their platform. Who wants that?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to see that.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to start really looking at themselves and what they morally view in the world and how they want to conduct themselves out into the world.
I think people often just use social media to go in and just vent on whatever's going on in their own life, and the trolling and the just all of that can be very toxic, and so I think there is a certain amount of personal responsibility we all have to take, and I think we're getting at that place now. I think that the Trump ban is going to kind of break, what is it, the glass ceiling of people coming forward and realizing, okay, now what's the next step? Because it's been around for 20 years, but as you say, I know, like, your mind's blown by people just realizing that now, and I think that's very true. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next year, and especially the next 5 years, as to where things go. I also find some networks they're structured so differently. Twitter moves so fast, and it's always at the very front of the horizon with anything breaking and everything. Facebook's, often a little bit slower to the punch of things because Twitter's so 140 characters fast, just like bits of information. Facebook, it's more articles and more people reading. Though I think what's interesting is that's changing, and I've been a big person that's like push this forward. Is what happens if Facebook just becomes screenshots of tweets? And like Facebook's just becoming screenshots of Twitter. So I wonder how Facebook is going to manage to keep up on that realm, on that front. But yes, I agree with all you're saying. See if anybody else said anything here. Steve said, I'm sure most Republicans didn't want that kind of representation. 2,000 from half, if 350 million is nothing. Yes, they were idiots. Both sides have those. Both sides suck. Well, I think there's truth to that. That not everybody wanted, obviously, people breaking down the Capitol. That's not what everybody wanted. So that happens on both sides. How come losing side doesn't have to disband? They both win. They both take turns. It's a show, and the joke is on the people. How come the losing side doesn't have to disband? I'm not really sure what disband in what way. They both take turns. It's a show. Talking about winning the election. I'm not sure what they're referencing there, but anyway, I feel like this was good today, Kira. I feel like we covered a lot as far as social media and how it connects to what's happening just in very recent days with Trump ban and Capitol Riot, and all of that. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the next step is.
Yes, it's a brand new year. I told my followers that, and people that are on my social media, that careful what you wish for. At the end of 2020, everybody was like, can't wait for 2020 to end. I'm like, wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I would not say that.
Well,
got to live in the present. There is no such thing as future. It's all we have is this moment right now. So don't be wishing it away.
I mean, that's the amusing thing about it is we act like 2020 is over, and everybody kind of does it tongue in cheek. But I think there is some, if you say something enough, it's the old like repetition. If you say something enough, it becomes a belief. Where
Correct.
like even though it's meant tongue in cheek, people just start to believe that psychologically, oh, this is a new year, so things are supposed to be different. When really all that's happening is the sun set and it's a new day. We just put the labels on it. Like,
correct.
Because somebody a long time ago said, we're going to label this way, and suddenly we had a calendar.
It wasn't that long ago either.
I mean,
so,
I mean, there's so many things like that. Like somebody once said to me, the one thing you never get to decide is your own name. Like we just decided that our parents were to decide our own name, and that became the way things were. There's so many things like that we don't think about, like we accept because how things were. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Like fun fact, I'll leave you with a fun fact. I posted this on my Instagram on New Year's. I'm like, for New Year's, every post I was seeing was, oh, this year was so tumultuous, and then I'm like, oh, I'm not doing that because everybody knows it was tumultuous. We all went through it. Like, we don't need to rehash every individual year, holy hell. So what I did was I posted an interesting fun fact. And the fun fact is Julius Caesar is actually the one that moved our new year from March to January.
Really?
And that only lasted until not that long, because then Europe decided not to do that. So Great Britain and in the 1500s, they decided not to go along that route. So
and that's how
the American colonies didn't start, they didn't actually move New Year's to January until like 1700s. So this is all very new, like calendars and time, and it's all bullshit. So the sooner you can realize quantum physics and all of that kind of stuff,
Right.
the easier your life gets, because every day is a new year. At
Every
that
day is
point, it's all made up.
and it's also connects to living in the present and whatever moment you're in. Michael Fontaine asked, was that April 1st? How did they label the new year? I guess so. What you're saying, like,
Yeah, it was. I believe it was March 25th. I think it was. It moved several times,
okay.
because it's the Julius Caesar calendar, and then we moved. We decided to move to the Georgian or whatever calendar. So it's not like it's. We don't think about these things on a day-to-day basis. We're just like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Right.
But like Julius Caesar added days to certain months. I mean, it's all make believe. So don't think about things as in terms of months and years or days, because that stuff is all human made and not that long ago. So fun fact, live in the present.
New Year, in relating to Happy New Year, this is officially, as we call it, we are in a new year now,
Yes.
with the label and everything. So our first episode, we're now 50 episodes in 2 years. Before you know it, we'll be at 100 episodes. We're gonna keep it Thursdays. This first one was on a Saturday. We just had to get through the stuff, everything that's happening. But we're gonna be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. LA, 5 p.m. if you're on the East Coast. Sometimes we're a little late. Sometimes we were 10 or 15 minutes late today, but we're trying to get that down. It's just the setup of these things. I'll tell you what, you guys, creating a podcast is a lot more than it looks like from their point of view. So we're getting there. We're going to try to be better with being on time, and you plan on Thursday.
Yes, thank you so much for everyone joining in and tuning in. Jeff, always good to see you.
Jeff and Kira, episode 50 here at Jeff and Kira Live. We now have it on top of the viewer. You can get Jeff and Kira Live. We're the future. The future is Jeff and Kira Live. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next Thursday, Pacific 5 East. Later.
Bye, guys.